Have you ever been so consumed by a thought, a person, or a goal, that it begins to take over your mind, controlling your every move, whispering in your head, even when you try to sleep? That's not passion anymore. That's obsession. And obsession, when guided by the wrong kind of intelligence, becomes one of the most dangerous weapons a human mind can wield. Centuries ago, a man named Niccolo Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. To most people, he was a cunning political thinker, a manipulator of power, the man who taught rulers to control without mercy. But few realized that behind his strategies lay an understanding of human obsession, how to create it, how to use it, and how to protect oneself from those who are consumed by it. Machiavelli didn't just write about power. He studied the dark psychology that drives people to sacrifice everything for it. In his world, obsession wasn't a weakness. It was an art. The kind of art that could turn ordinary ambition into an unstoppable force, capable of shaping nations or destroying them from within. He saw how obsession could twist love into control, loyalty into fear, and intelligence into manipulation. For Machiavelli, the human mind was the battlefield, and obsession was the weapon most people never realized they were holding. But here's where it gets darker. Modern psychology now confirms what Machiavelli observed centuries ago. Obsession rewires the brain. It blurs the line between desire and need. It traps you in a loop where your every thought feeds the same hunger, whether for power, for someone's attention, or for revenge. And the more you feed it, the stronger it becomes. That's why obsession can make even the calmest person unpredictable, ruthless, and at times brilliant in their madness. In this video, we're going to explore the hidden psychology behind obsession, the invisible strings that control your focus, emotions, and behavior. We'll uncover how Machiavelli understood these strings and used them as tools of influence and survival. You'll see how the same mind that wrote The Prince didn't just talk about rulers and politics. He revealed the mechanics of human control, the way obsession could be turned into power when others allowed it to consume them. By the end of this video, you'll understand why obsession is never random. You'll learn how it begins, why it deepens, and how certain people, especially those who think like Machiavelli, can use it against you without you ever realizing it. You'll also learn how to use Machiavellian insight to defend yourself from manipulation and to channel your own obsessive energy into something sharper, stronger, and more strategic. Because obsession isn't always evil, it's energy. And when mastered, it becomes focus. When uncontrolled, it becomes your master. Machiavelli knew that the difference between a ruler and a pawn isn't intelligence, but control over one's mind. He warned that the person who cannot master their emotions will eventually be ruled by someone who can. That's the secret art, using the same fire that consumes others to forge your own destiny. So stay with me until the end of this video, because we're about to uncover how Machiavelli's forgotten lessons can help you decode the psychology of obsession, how it works, how it controls, how you can turn it into your silent advantage.
Welcome to Psych Algorithm, where philosophy meets psychology, and where ancient wisdom meets modern mind science.
If you're someone who wants to understand how people think, how power moves, and how to master your own mind, then you're in the right place. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because what you'll learn here isn't taught in classrooms. It's the hidden code of human behavior, the same one Machiavelli used to outthink his enemies and survive the impossible. Before we talk about the dark psychology behind obsession, we first need to understand what obsession actually is, and how it's different from something that looks almost the same, passion. The two can appear identical on the surface. Both drive you to work harder, to focus, to chase a goal with intensity. But deep down, they are worlds apart. Passion gives you energy. Obsession consumes it. Passion is like fire contained in a furnace. It fuels creation, growth, and progress. It pushes you to master a skill, to build something meaningful, to keep improving. Passion is guided by purpose. It has balance, direction, and control. You can step away from it when you need to. You can rest, breathe, and come back stronger. Passion works with you. It serves you. Obsession, on the other hand, is fire without walls. It spreads until it burns everything around it, including the person who started it. When passion evolves into obsession, the line between ambition and addiction disappears. You stop chasing your goal for meaning and start chasing it because you can't stop. It's no longer about growth. It's about need. That's the moment when your own mind becomes the cage. Machiavelli understood this transformation. He saw how people could become so fixated on an idea, a person, or a position of power, that it blinded them completely. In his writings, he described rulers who began as passionate leaders, driven to create stability or strength, but ended as tyrants, obsessed with control, unable to trust anyone, seeing threats everywhere. To Machiavelli, obsession was the point where reason gives way to fear, and fear, once it takes the throne, never rules with mercy. Psychologically, obsession begins when the brain's reward system gets hijacked. Every small success releases dopamine, a surge of pleasure that says you're getting closer. But obsession doesn't know when to. It rewires your mind to crave that hit again and again, even when there's no real reward left. You start to chase the feeling instead of the goal. That's why obsessive people often can't explain why they keep going. They're not pursuing purpose anymore. They're chasing the rush of pursuit itself. Passion, in contrast, allows distance. A passionate person can look at their dream objectively. They can step back, rethink, and adapt. They can accept failure and try again. But an obsessed mind can tolerate stillness. It panics when progress slows. It interprets pause as loss. It begins to imagine betrayal, competition, or threat, where none exists. It creates stories, suspicions, and fears to justify its own restlessness. Machiavelli warned of this kind of mental trap long before psychology gave it a name. He saw it in courtiers who couldn't stop plotting, in lovers who couldn't stop scheming, in rulers who destroyed their own empires just to feel secure. He understood that obsession is rooted in insecurity, the deep fear of losing what one desires most. And the irony, he noted, is that this fear often brings about the very loss it tries to prevent. Healthy passion, by contrast, is built on confidence. It doesn't demand control. It thrives on curiosity. It doesn't fear change. It adapts to it. Passion has humility. It understands that maturity takes time. Obsession has pride. It wants victory now, no matter the cost. And as Machiavelli would say, pride disguised as purpose can be the most dangerous illusion of all. If you observe closely, you'll notice that passion creates clarity, while obsession creates chaos. Passion focuses your energy outward, to build, to express, to contribute. Obsession turns it inward, to protect, possess, to dominate. One is driven by love for the goal, the other by fear of losing it. So before we journey deeper into Machiavelli's secret art, remember this: the most dangerous minds in history were rarely without purpose. But what made them truly powerful, or truly destructive, was the point where passion crossed the border and became obsession. Machiavelli lived in an age of ruthless ambition, where loyalty shifted like the wind, and survival demanded more than courage. It required strategy. In The Prince, he revealed a truth that unsettled the moral order of his time. Power isn't maintained through goodness, but through understanding human nature in its rawest form. He argued that people are guided more by fear than by love, more by self-interest than by loyalty. To survive, a ruler must learn to manipulate appearances, control perception, and use morality as a mask rather than a rule book. This idea, the ends justify the means, was not a call to cruelty, but a recognition of how the world truly works. Machiavelli observed that the pursuit of power demands control over both others and oneself. The prince, he wrote, must learn when to act like a lion and when to act like a fox. The lion represents strength, the fox represents cunning, and true mastery comes from blending the two. Yet, within this philosophy lies a darker undercurrent, the risk that control becomes addiction. The same clarity that allows a Machiavellian thinker to navigate chaos can evolve into a consuming need to dominate it. That's the seed of obsession, when control stops being a strategy and becomes a hunger. This is where psychology meets philosophy. Modern research on Machiavellianism, as described by psychology today and supported by decades of studies, defines it as a personality pattern marked by manipulation, cynicism, and cold calculation. People with strong Machiavellian traits view relationships as transactions, emotions as tools, and morality as flexible. They don't trust easily, but they know how to make others trust them. Their world is a chessboard, and everyone else is a piece to be moved. It's not that they hate others, they simply see them as means to an end. At first, this mindset grants power. It gives a person sharp perception and strategic focus. But over time, it breeds obsession. When you begin to see every interaction as a contest, you stop experiencing life. You start managing it. Every smile becomes a test, every friendship a potential threat, every victory a temporary shield. The Machiavellian mind, once a tool of survival, becomes trapped in its own system of control. And that is how manipulation becomes obsession. The obsession with power, in particular, is the purest form of this transformation. It begins with the belief that power equals safety. Machiavelli saw this in rulers who clung to authority, not for service or purpose, but to silence their fear of losing control. They believed that as long as they could dominate others, they could not be harmed. But power is a fragile thing. It must be constantly maintained, defended, and proven. The more a person tries to secure it, the more insecure they become. And in that endless loop of control and fear, obsession takes root. Another face of obsession is attachment. The kind that blends desire with domination. A Machiavellian mind can become fixated on people just as easily as on power. To such a person, relationships are rich assets. Love becomes a tool of control. Affection becomes a method of binding another's will. The obsession isn't about connection, it's about ownership. The manipulator studies their target like a game, learning weaknesses, desires, fears. At first, this may appear as deep passion or attention, but beneath it lies a calculating hunger for dominance. Once the manipulator feels they are losing influence, that attachment turns possessive, even cruel. Then comes the third face of obsession: revenge. Machiavelli once wrote that men should be either crushed or forgiven, because minor injuries provoke retaliation. But total destruction leaves no room for revenge. He understood that vengeance is one of the strongest psychological forces, capable of shaping entire destinies. In a Machiavellian sense, revenge is not always about emotion. It's about restoring perceived order. The obsessive mind cannot tolerate defeat or humiliation. It fixates on the past, turning every memory into fuel for future conquest. This obsession can last years, hidden behind a calm smile, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. What ties these three forms together, power, attachment, and revenge, is control. Whether it's controlling others through authority, affection, or retaliation, the root is the same: the fear of powerlessness. And it's this fear that builds obsession from within. Psychologically, obsession builds in predictable stages. It often starts with a trigger, something that threatens one's sense of control or identity. This could be a loss, rejection, betrayal, or even the feeling of being overlooked. For someone with Machiavellian traits, this threat is intolerable. Their mind begins to spiral into rumination, replaying events, analyzing every detail, constructing narratives that justify their fixation. They idealize the object of their obsession, whether it's a person, a goal, or an image of themselves. Every thought becomes a rehearsal for regaining control. Insecurity amplifies this process. Studies on attachment theory show that early emotional instability, feeling unseen, unsafe, or unvalued, creates an adult pattern of seeking control to avoid vulnerability. Machiavellian individuals often hide deep insecurities behind their calm exterior. They crave admiration but fear dependency. This tension, wanting closeness but fearing weakness, creates the perfect storm for obsession. When their control slips, they panic. That panic fuels manipulation, deceit, and emotional games meant to reassert dominance. Emotionally, obsession creates a cycle of reward and withdrawal. Every small victory, a text reply, a sign of respect, a minor success, releases dopamine, giving temporary satisfaction. But when that stimulus salils, anxiety surges back. To silence it, the person doubles down, pushing harder, thinking more, scheming deeper. Over time, the brain associates relief with control, and obsession becomes a survival mechanism. It's not about pleasure anymore. It's about escaping fear. Machiavelli's insight was that fear is both the ruler's greatest weapon and his greatest weakness. He advised leaders to inspire fear rather than feel it. Yet in doing so, he revealed a paradox. Those who rely on fear to maintain control are often the most terrified of losing it. This is the heart of Machiavellian obsession. The mind becomes a mirror of the strategies it uses. The manipulator ends up trapped in the very web he spins. In relationships, this obsession manifests as emotional manipulation. The Machiavellian thinker might alternate between charm and withdrawal, affection and punishment. To test loyalty, each interaction becomes an experiment in dominance. But beneath the cold logic lies a deeper desperation, to confirm that they still hold power. When they don't, rage or despair erupts. To outsiders, this looks like cold cruelty. But to the Machiavellian mind, it feels like survival. In professional or political life, the same mechanism drives ambition to extremes. A Machiavellian personality may obsess over status, recognition, or influence. They analyze social hierarchies the way a scientist studies data, predicting movements, alliances, betrayals. This gives them advantage, but also exhaustion. They cannot rest, because their mind is always calculating, always scanning for threats. They mistake vigilance for strength. But in truth, it is fear wearing the mask of control. Neuroscience supports what Machiavelli observed centuries ago. Obsession activates the brain's reward system and the amygdala, the center of emotional memory and fear. This combination floods the mind with urgency and importance. The obsessed person feels compelled to act, even when logic warns against it. That's why Machiavellian obsession can seem so disciplined yet so self-destructive. The person believes they are in control, but in reality the obsession is controlling them. In a darker sense, Machiavelli might have seen this as both tragedy and necessity. For him, power demanded sacrifice. The ruler who hesitated lost everything. So perhaps he accepted obsession as the price of greatness, a force that burns the weak, but tempers the strong. Yet, even he warned that excess power corrupts judgment. When manipulation becomes habitual, when control becomes compulsion, the strategist stops seeing reality clearly. He begins to live in a world of his own construction, one ruled not by truth, but by fear, suspicion, and ego. And so, Machiavelli's philosophy, once meant as a tool for survival, becomes a map of human downfall. The dark psychology of obsession doesn't begin with evil intent. It begins with the desire, never feel powerless again. But as Machiavelli himself might whisper from history, those who seek absolute control eventually lose control of themselves. When obsession begins to take hold of the mind, it doesn't announce itself with chaos. It hides behind focus, discipline, and determination. To the outside world, a person under obsessive influence may appear ambitious, arrogant, or even genius. But beneath that surface lies a tightening loop of thought and behavior that slowly consumes them. They become relentless. Every decision, every emotion, every conversation bends toward the object of their fixation, whether it's a goal, a person, or an idea of themselves. A Machiavellian personality under obsession becomes particularly dangerous because their intensity is disguised as control. Unlike ordinary obsession, which can look emotional or impulsive, the high Machiavellian hides their fixation behind logic. They plan, calculate, and disguise their motives with precision. They will tell themselves and others that they are merely being strategic. But in truth, the strategy becomes the obsession. The plan becomes their identity. They can't stop thinking about the next move, the next advantage, the next way to reinforce their power. Psychologists describe this pattern as instrumental obsession, where actions are no longer about satisfaction, but about maintaining a constructed self-image of control. People with high Machiavellian traits, as Psychology Today notes, often show low empathy but high strategic awareness. They can read others' emotions, but not feel them. They study people the way a scientist studies behavior, observing reactions, predicting outcomes, adjusting tactics. This emotional distance gives them power, but it also isolates them. The more they manipulate others, the less they can connect genuinely. Every relationship becomes a performance, every emotion a mask. The signs of this kind of obsession are subtle at first. The person becomes increasingly controlling over their environment, their schedule, or the people around them. They insist on being the one who decides, who knows, who directs. They may use charm, persuasion, or even guilt to get their way. When charm fails, they shift to intimidation or withdrawal. Emotional manipulation becomes a routine, not out of cruelty, but because control feels like safety. There's also a certain restlessness in their presence. High Machs under obsessive influence cannot tolerate uncertainty. They constantly seek information, reassurance, or validation. They may check others' loyalty through small tests, asking questions, withholding details, creating minor conflicts just to observe reactions. When people disappoint them, they don't react with open emotion. Instead, they calculate their response, often seeking subtle revenge through reputation damage, exclusion, or silence. Inside, however, their emotional landscape is not calm. It's turbulent, filled with anxiety and fear of loss. Obsessive control is a mask they wear to hide instability. They need to appear composed, toothed, and untouchable. But when the mask cracks, the collapse is dramatic. Rage, paranoia, or deep withdrawal follows. In private, they can become consumed by rumination, replaying events, rewriting conversations, searching for hidden meanings. Their mind becomes a trap of their own making. The danger intensifies when obsession merges fully with Machiavellian drive. This is when the person begins to justify anything in the name of the outcome. They tell themselves the ends justify the means, echoing Machiavelli's own words. But forget the wisdom behind them, that even strategy must serve reason. Once obsession takes command, reason becomes servant to fear. This collision of obsession and Machiavellianism leads to destruction on multiple fronts. In relationships, it creates manipulation masked as love. The obsessed Machiavellian partner may shower affection, promise loyalty, and display deep care, but only to maintain emotional dominance. When their control weakens, they turn cold, distant, or cruel. The relationship becomes a battlefield of power, not intimacy. The partner's independence is seen as defiance, and every disagreement feels like betrayal. Over time, the manipulator's constant testing and emotional games erode trust, leaving both sides trapped in a toxic cycle of fear and dependence. In workplaces, the same psychology creates toxicity. The high Mach obsessed with success will sacrifice team harmony, ethics, and even truth for personal gain. They may undermine colleagues, take credit for others' work, or quietly spread doubt to eliminate competition. Their leadership style appears confident, but breeds tension. Employees feel watched, controlled, and disposable. Studies in PMC journals on the dark triad, Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy, show that these traits correlate with workplace bullying, manipulation, and burnout. Over time, the obsessed Machiavellian often sabotages the very systems they depend on, because their paranoia and need for control destroy collaboration and trust. And then there's the internal cost, the self-destruction that follows prolonged obsession. A mind constantly running calculations can't rest. The stress of maintaining control over everything erodes sleep, health, and peace mind. The high Mach individual begins to isolate, mistrusting even allies. They lose their sense of joy, empathy, and curiosity. Power stops feeling like security and starts feeling like prison. Psychologically, they enter a state of cognitive fatigue, where paranoia replaces creativity and control becomes compulsion. The strategist turns into the captive of his own desire. But even the sharpest mind can break free once it recognizes the pattern. The first step is awareness, seeing the difference between control and fear. Obsession thrives in denial. It loses strength when confronted. Recognizing obsessive thought means noticing when your focus stops serving you and starts consuming you. Ask, am I pursuing this goal to grow, or just to avoid feeling powerless? That single question can interrupt the loop. Setting boundaries is the next step. For someone trapped in obsession, boundaries feel like weakness, but they're actually protection. Limiting time spent thinking, planning, or interacting with the object of fixation creates distance, and distance restores perspective. For example, scheduling mental breaks from analysis or reflection helps calm the brain's reward cycle. The space between thought and reaction is where control returns. Awareness of manipulation, both in oneself and others, is equally crucial. The Machiavellian mind often justifies its tactics as necessary or smart. But when those tactics begin to tow relationships or self-respect, it's time to stop. Seeking honest feedback from trusted people or professionals helps expose blind spots. Therapy, mindfulness, or journaling can reintroduce empathy, the very quality high Machs suppress to maintain power. Empathy doesn't weaken strategy, it refines it. It helps see others not as threats, but as human mirrors. Shifting focus from control to growth transforms the entire psychology. Instead of asking, how can I win? Ask, how can I understand? Instead of measuring success by dominance, measure it by Machiavelli. Obsession thrives on fear of loss, but growth thrives on acceptance of change. When a person learns to tolerate uncertainty, they stop needing to manipulate every outcome. That's the freedom obsession cannot coexist with. Here is where Machiavelli's art can be reinterpreted. His lessons were never about cruelty. They were about realism. He understood human nature not to exploit it, but to navigate it. The problem is that over centuries, readers focused on his darker advice and ignored his deeper wisdom. That strategy must serve stability, and that control without self-awareness leads to ruin. Applied ethically, Machiavelli's principles can teach balance, not manipulation. His idea of the lion and the fox, for instance, is not about deceit, but adaptability. The lion symbolizes courage, the strength to face fear. The fox represents intelligence, the wisdom to act with cunning and subtlety. When combined consciously, they form a mind that can lead without falling into obsession. The modern Machiavellian thinker can use this balance to manage ambition ethically, to think several moves ahead, yet remain grounded in empathy and self-control. Another principle worth reclaiming is long-term thinking. Machiavelli advised rulers to see beyond immediate gains, to anticipate consequences, and to build strategies that outlast emotion. In modern terms, this means resisting impulsive actions born of obsession, like reacting to rejection or competition with revenge. Instead, pause and choose decisions that align with long-term peace, not short-term victory. The ability to delay reaction is the true mark of power. Self-awareness is the final form of Machiavellian mastery. Understanding one's own motives, fears, and triggers turns manipulation inward toward self-discipline instead of control over others. The true strategist learns to govern their own mind first. They recognize that obsession begins when desire loses proportion, when fear replaces reason. By observing their own thoughts without judgment, they weaken obsession's hold. This is Machiavelli's secret art, used positively, the art of mastering perception without losing humanity. In practice, this means turning strategic thinking into a form of mental clarity. Anticipate emotions as you would anticipate threats. Prepare responses to stress as you would prepare defenses in politics. When you understand your weaknesses, others cannot exploit them. When you recognize your patterns, manipulation loses its power. The ethical Machiavellian doesn't seek to dominate but to endure. Calm, aware, and in command of self. Machiavelli never claimed power was evil. He claimed it was fragile. His writings remind us that the pursuit of control without inner discipline leads to downfall. But when his teachings are applied with awareness, they become a path toward strength, wisdom, and balance. The same understanding that once fueled dark obsession can, when reversed, illuminate freedom, the mastery of one's own mind, not the domination of others. You've now seen how obsession can evolve, from a spark of passion into a consuming fire, from focus into fixation, from power into peril. We explored how Machiavelli's timeless understanding of control, passion, and human desire reveals the secret structure of obsession. He saw what few dared to see, that behind every pursuit of greatness lies the shadow of compulsion, and behind every strategist lies the risk of becoming a prisoner of their own mind. But we also uncovered the brighter side, the transformation that happens when awareness enters the picture. Obsession can destroy, yes, but it can also build. When directed with self-awareness and discipline, it becomes focus, endurance, and mastery. Machiavelli's secret art, when used with wisdom, teaches not how to control others, but how to command yourself, your emotions, your impulses, your thoughts. That's real power. So ask yourself, where is your obsession leading you? Is it sharpening your mind, or slowly caging it? Is it your tool, or has it become your trap? The answer to that question, it's whether you rise with clarity or fall into the darkness of your own design. If this journey through the dark psychology of obsession gave you a new perspective on power, control, and the human mind, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Psych algorithm. Your support helps us keep decoding the hidden patterns of thought, strategy, and behavior that shape our world. Stay curious, stay aware, and remember, true mastery begins not with others, but within your own mind.